Welcome to another episode of The Greatest Pod, where we discuss and debate what makes something great. I'm Ron Swallow.
I'm Ed Greer.
I'm producer Bill.
And today we have a great episode for you. I'm just going to lay it out. Who's the greatest? Scorsese or Spielberg? That's the topic at hand.
Man, this is hard.
I mean, you thought we were coming in hot with Schwarzenegger versus Stallone. I mean, this is taking it to a whole other level.
Well, okay, I'm going to pose a question. I mean, obviously, this is the comparison we're doing, and there are two of the most creative, biggest filmmakers in the last 40, 50 years, 60 years even.
50 years, yeah, for sure.
So, but I feel like they're so different. Are they comparable?
Well, here's why I think this is an interesting question. I think number one, inarguably, right? These are the two guys that have shaped modern cinema. Obviously it's a lot more nuanced than this, but I think to a certain extent, every modern filmmaker is some combination of Scorsese and Spielberg, just because these guys changed the game and did it a whole new way. And just whatever you want to think, whether it's historical epics, blockbusters, gritty crime, that marriage of sort of like exploitation sensibilities with mainstream moviegoers. In Spielberg's case, the marriage of horror with mainstream moviegoers. Like, these guys have defined what cinema is for the 21st century. I don't think there's any other name you could put on that list short of maybe Stanley Kubrick, but even that's a little bit esoteric for, the pop culture audience. And so even though they're very different filmmakers, number two, they're also friends and collaborators. And it's very well documented that they throw ideas back and forth. They screen early cuts of each other's movies. So I think looking at them side by side might be instructive in that respect. And also, like, these guys are the minds behind the movies that we and our audience love most, the movies that made us. So why not try to dig in and just throw them in a versus battle against each other? In that respect, it's very much like Stallone versus Schwarzenegger.
I think you're right. Ed?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the one thing that popped into my mind right as we were about to record, I was about to ruin everything and go, is it the only person that's actually trying to compete with Spielberg, James Cameron? Like, when you really look at it, I think, and even then it's like, that's not true, because James Cameron isn't like an auteur. He like writes his movies to be filmed and he wants to control all of that. Whereas both Scorsese and Spielberg have more conventionally, like directors do, worked with different sets of artists on a lot of the different movies. You know what I mean? So it's like, no, Jim Cameron is not a closer analog than Steven Spielberg is to Scorsese. They are Stallonian and Schwarzeneggerian in regards to, you can't say either one isn't a master of his field, but they are doing it so differently.
Yeah, and even if you look at something like James Cameron, James Cameron is still working in a Spielberg model. I mean, Spielberg pioneered both the fusion of blockbuster cinema and horror, as well as sort of the breathless breakneck chase movie, both of which are sort of James Cameron's bread and butter. And Spielberg was doing it, 5-6 years before Cameron came on the scene. So it's again, not to say that James Cameron hasn't had an outsized impression on modern cinema. He has. I think a lot of directors can be put on that list. But I honestly think if you look at the traditions in which modern directors are working, I don't want to say they start at Scorsese and Spielberg, but they were codified by Scorsese and Spielberg. Those are just two guys who showed us how to make movies differently. And I think, again, there's a commonality in the passion that they bring both to cinema as an art form and their desire to push it forward into interesting new territories. So let's get into that.
Yeah, I just want real quickly, I think I discovered a way to phrase this that Scorsese would love. These guys are the Marvel and DC of modern filmmaking. In regards to, you like one of them more than the other one, that's your life. You know what I'm saying?
That's it, dude.
You know? So let's get into, okay, I got into a lot of trouble by being shitty to people who drink Mountain Dew and stuff like that. Like, I'm not better than them. We're part of the same trash culture, but it is, to me, trash culture. So you get in trouble trying to be like, what's the profile of the Scorsese fan? What's the profile of the Spielberg fan? But I kind of want to do a little bit of that. Like, what makes one lean more Scorsese or more Spielberg, if indeed that this question comes up to the layman?
Oh. Man, that's so interesting because, like, okay, let's take it from the Ron Swallow point of view, which is, kind of dumb. No, I'm joking, but what I'm talking about is like, I probably lean towards Spielberg because a lot of his stuff is digestible, and I'm not saying that Scorsese stuff isn't digestible, because it is. It's great stuff. It's some of the best filmmaking ever. And I think he's won a ridiculous amount of Oscars, he's obviously great at what he does, but like E.T., E.T. is wonderful. And there's so many movies that Spielberg has made that to me are just like a little more fun, a little more, I don't know, entertaining. And Scorsese is great, but it's also like some of the most depressing shit ever on film. Like, it's super sad. It's great super sad. It's well written super sad. It's tragic. It's beautiful. It's dramatic. But like, man, there's some fun stuff that Spielberg does. So that, to me, that's where like maybe some of the differences come is, do you want something that is more of a blockbuster fun time, or do you want to get down and gritty and in the dirt and feel like what a person who is trying to get to the top feels like when they fail at the end?
Well, and I would have two comments to that. I think number one would just be to say, hold on, Steven Spielberg is the guy who made Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List,
True.
Munich. Like, so I think Spielberg, I don't want to say gets a bad rap, but gets an inaccurate rap for being, sort of lovable and fun. I think sort of integral to the Spielberg DNA is a very cynical take on the world. One of the things that makes Spielberg heroes so likable is that they are really up against everything. You know what I mean? It's not just a simple like, well, there's a good guy and there's a bad guy and they're going to fight. I mean, it is literally one man or one woman, as the case may be, against institutions, against fate, against individual oppressors. All Spielberg movies kind of operate that way. And there's a deep streak of cynicism in those movies. So I think that's a point we should return to. But I also hear what you're saying, Ron. And if I could sum it up in a single word, I think it would be, pardon me, I think it would be whimsy. Spielberg has the ability to be whimsical, whatever that means to you, to embrace a sort of magical realism, to embrace a childlike point of view, to embrace sort of a fun, a fun moments or sort of lighthearted moments or moments of, very sort of saccharine beauty, none of which I think Scorsese really ever does. I think there's I don't know if you want to call it hard-edged, but Scorsese has a more, I don't know if it's hard-edged or realistic. It's a non-whimsical take. I think in Spielberg movies, there's room for magical realism, even in very dour circumstances. And I think Scorsese leaves no room for that whatsoever. He's a very unflinching filmmaker.
Well, I mean, I think to the point to put on that point is that they have a different conception of reality, because I think that Spielberg likes reality better with some of the edges sanded off, just so we can get out the best entertainment product. It's almost like Scorsese wants to try to get to the real of what happened, even if it's fake. But with his rehearsal process and all this different jazz, it just seems like he's trying to get to some uber reality that's still operatic and big and majestic like film. He's trying to get to a reality that is it's not clean because nothing in life is clean. It's not as snappy because nothing in life is that snappy. It doesn't, I think even his like use of music, like his use of like soundtracks rather than score, it's some sort of hint to songs play on the radio. When you get mad in real life, a fucking buoying John Williams score doesn't start going dun 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 dun, and you get up and you wipe the blood off and beat a guy up. The Rolling Stones are playing while you're getting your ass kicked. It's a different way of seeing the world.
Yeah.
Well, I think I would argue that maybe, Spielberg believes in individual heroes. Because again, I don't know that Spielberg thinks that the world is a soft and cuddly place. I don't even know that Spielberg thinks the world is a more forgiving place than Scorsese does in a lot of ways. But I do think, whether he believes it as a person, and I kind of feel like he has to because his movies embrace it so wholeheartedly, his movies at least portray the idea that certain individuals with enough gumption, with enough will, with enough innate goodness can rise above the shittiness of the world and really achieve something meaningful. And I don't know if Scorsese actually believes that. I think Scorsese is more interested in showing how the world will tear you down, while Spielberg is interested in showing that no matter the circumstances, you can get a leg up on the world. But I don't know that their worldviews are necessarily incompatible.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And we'll get into it, but yeah.
I mean, okay, I'm also looking at some more Scorsese movies because, I'm not an expert, but Wolf of Wall Street, there's some great comedy in that. Like,
Scorsese really can do comedy.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the same time, sure, there's not a lot of whimsy, but he does have a great sense of humor. The Aviator, Color of Money is like, that is a pretty awesome movie. Like, I mean, I'm just thinking about like some of the more like Color of Money. I mean, it's pretty fucked up, but it is also has some upbeat moments and it does have a hero that's kind of a guy you want to like and dislike, but at the same time is the hero that can persevere with great skill. You know what I mean? So it's just, I think I was missing out on some Scorsese. I don't want to call it whimsy, but a little bit more lightheartedness than we probably give him.
I mean,
well, yeah, it's just a matter of.
Scorsese knows how to have. Sorry, all I'll say is Scorsese knows how to have fun in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't get it twisted.
Oh yeah, no, and Scorsese knows about the harshness of real life. I didn't mean that in tone that he didn't, but in a Martin Scorsese movie, the hero will never find a trapdoor thing on accident while the Nazis are trying to shoot him and his dad. And then they happen to fall into a boat that happens to be going down the river to meet with, you know what I mean? That doesn't happen in Scorsese movies. In Spielberg movies, it happens because there's something operatic about this special individual who has to get his dad down to stop the Nazis. So we're not going to bog you down with this bullshit of how they laid there for 3 days while the Nazis kicked the shit out of them. They're just going to find a little penknife and get out of it and get onto the adventure. Whereas, in a Scorsese picture, I don't know, we're probably not with Indiana Jones. We're probably with one of the, with somebody else in that story to begin with. You know what I mean?
That said, I mean, I think some of the most interesting Scorsese, not the most interesting, I mean, clearly they're not his biggest hits, but some worthwhile Scorsese movies are the ones where he does sort of embrace a little bit more of an operatic tone, a little bit more of an unreal tone. And I'm thinking specifically of movies like Gangs of New York, The Aviator, Hugo, which is a really weird sort of whimsical left turn for Scorsese.
What about Bring Out Your Dead?
Well, I was just going to say that. I was going to say even movies like The Last Temptation of Christ or Bringing Out the Dead, which are very dour movies, but which are not the sort of like street level urban tales that, Goodfellas or Taxi Driver is. He's got more range, and I would say he's got more tonal range than I think we usually give him credit for. And again, you're right. It's not the same thing as Indiana Jones finding the trapdoor to escape the Nazis as John Williams swells in the background. But there's enough unreality in all those movies I just mentioned, and enough sort of choreographed unreality, big spectacle, that, like, again, he's not necessarily working on a totally different playing field than Spielberg. I think he just chooses to use that ability to create a choreographed unreality to send a different message. And I would agree with you there, Ed, that, like, at the end of the day, he's not telling hero stories about people whose inherent goodness saves them. He's telling stories, even if they have inherent goodness, it's going to be compromised because the world is that harsh of a mistress.
Yeah, it makes sense. So let's go into a couple of numbers situations. Now, we already know Spielberg has a way bigger box office, but Martin Scorsese is no slouch. But then when we go into other numbers, say Academy Awards, Scorsese, but he is won Best Director for The Departed.
Yes.
Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Editing, Best Picture for The Departed.
Only Best Director win. And kind of, I'm sorry, not to cut you off, Ron, but kind of infamously, he's been nominated for Best Director at the Academy Awards, amongst other award ceremonies, many, many, many times, but he did not win until 2006 with The Departed.
I mean, it looks like Spielberg actually has just as many nominations as well, like 17 or 18. So yeah, I guess that's also competitive. Does box office count at all? We mentioned it earlier that we probably were not going to count it too much, but do we count box office at all?
I mean, look, I think there's no question that, like, Spielberg is the godfather of the summer blockbuster, and so he's going to win that. I think that's worth something, and especially, talking to a nerd audience as we do, people like to pay attention to blockbuster box office returns. People like to say that counts for something. I don't know if I agree with them, but if we're going to start tallying, then yeah, in the box office category, Spielberg has a leg up on Marty.
Okay. So I'm also going to ask, I think this is an important question, and also just kind of fun to talk about. What's your favorite movies from each director? Like, do you have specific ones, maybe a top 3 or 4? Let's say you don't have to pick the favorite, because I think probably too hard.
I think that gets to the crux of the issue, though, because, like, for both of these guys, I think 3's hard. I think 3's really hard for me for these guys, and that speaks to them being a more direct competition than we just gave, in regards to that box office jazz. And also, man, I am just contrarian enough to hold that box office shit against them, because straight up, dude, this whole appeal to everybody shit, man. I wish I could figure out how to do it. That's true, but it ain't the end all be all of nothing, man. There's all kind of speak and spell ass motherfuckers out here that are really popular. That doesn't mean shit to me. I think so starting with the most popular, but also to me the best, I'll take Jaws over Schindler's List any motherfucking day. I'm sorry, I want to make out with my chick during it without my grandma being mad at me like that Seinfeld episode. So, like, when I watch a movie, sometimes even though I probably lean Scorsese in this debate, is probably in the tenor of my voice. But Spielberg, man, I don't know that there's anything that Spielberg or that Scorsese's ever done that's as good as fucking Jaws. Jaws is fucking amazing. Even to a modern audience that looks at the shark and goes, "Oh wow, they had a run on styrofoam down at the Costco, huh?" You know what I mean? Like, it's amazing. The performances are amazing. The score is literally perfect. The everything, I'm not even talking about that jazz of the shark not working, all that apocryphal bullshit. Just literally making a movie on the ocean that's supposed to be a blockbuster. And it's like how LeBron was supposed to be the next big thing. And he was just like, I'm definitely going to be that thing that you thought I was. That's so uncommon. So it being the birth of the modern super blockbuster, even though it might be contradictory to what I said before in regards to popularity, I think that's one of those movies that got super to be a giant blockbuster. Maybe the last true, I'm a blockbuster because true, I'm in a bunch of theaters, but I'm also the best movie right now. I didn't just get a good release date. I'm not counter programmed to get some dowager bullshit for old ladies. I'm not just here in the summer. I'm also king shit best movie this summer. Fuck all of y'all. And Spielberg did that. You know what I mean? And I just, yeah, Jaws is a champion.
See, and I would say on the Spielberg side of things, I would say the second time he did that, which was Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. Like, I have all the respect in the world for Indiana Jones, but like those movies just do not do it for me personally on the level that they do for a lot of nerds. But Jurassic Park, man, that you want to talk about a movie that stands the test of time and is pretty much perfect in every way.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't get much better. And that was honestly, that to me, that was the graduation of the Jaws formula to a truly modern cinematic experience.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, like, if we can pull the seams apart a little bit here, Spielberg has essentially two movies that he keeps making over and over again. One is the dark historical epic about some stuff that happened that was really, really fucked up, and trying to salvage those vestiges of heroism from individuals caught in the middle of that really fucked up thing. He does that extraordinarily well. And the other thing is essentially the chase movie with a ton of horror elements with a really, really strong sci-fi MacGuffin. And Jaws didn't quite have the sci-fi MacGuffin. And I think when he cracked it with Jurassic Park, with respect to Raiders of the Lost Ark, because that was really where I think he found his footing, I just think Jurassic Park perfected that Spielberg formula. I don't know that he's really ever reached it since. You know, some of his historical dramas I've been a huge fan of, but in terms of like that Spielberg chase movie, oh my God, Jurassic Park is perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I love that movie, and it's probably my favorite Spielberg movie, probably. I actually really do like Color of Money, though, so that's going to be in my top. It's one of those movies, though, that it might be one of those movies that I watched at a perfect time. You know what I mean? Like, I think I was learning about like gambling and hustling. And
Color of Money is Scorsese, though, isn't it? Is it not?
Yes, that's good. Well, that's what I was going to say. As far as Scorsese movie, I think Color of Money is one of my favorite. Even though I know that it's probably not even close to one of his best movies, I just really love it.
Hey, man,
I also
Paul
love
Newman. Paul Newman and Tom Cruise. Like, come on, or it was Tom Cruise was the young guy in that. It's a great movie.
Oh yeah, and just real quick, just because we're probably not going to circle back to this again because it is an awesome movie. Richard Price did the screenplay, and it's a continuation of The Hustler, a movie that's made like 1962, so like a 20-year-old sequel to a movie. Mwah. Great crime novelist does the screenplay, perfect. The morals and lessons that are imparted in that movie of just like sometimes it's better to lose than to win. Sometimes it's better to engineer a situation where you lose so you can win more. Sometimes everything isn't for you. Sometimes your thunderous break will get you fucked up and you won't be able to hustle the guys. There's so much logic in that thing. And last things last, it's a workman piece of art. Scorsese doesn't have some burning passion for the material. He owed like TriStar some goddamn body a movie, and he signed on to do it as a job. It is not like Goodfellas or Casino or even Taxi Driver or The Passion of the Christ or whatever. Last Temptation of Christ. It isn't anything like that. It was literally just a job he did, not unlike Cape Fear. And when you look at Scorsese as a workman director and Spielberg as a workman director, Spielberg was a workman guy coming straight out of TV when he did Jaws. Scorsese is just kind of doing this as like a lark in between projects and made The Color of fucking Money as like almost like a commercial, like how Tony Scott would shoot commercials in between movies and stuff like that. He kind of just did Color of Money like that, like a sketch, like a Pablo fucking Picasso sketch. It's beautiful.
I do think looking at at both of these guys' lesser works is going to be a really interesting comparison because I think, Ed, you're getting at it. Like, I think the worst Scorsese is quite a bit better than the worst Spielberg. But before we get there, I think we should just weigh in on our favorite Scorsese movies now that we've done Spielberg. And this one is honestly really tough for me because I think there's something to be said for The Wolf of Wall Street The Departed, and Casino. And I have a soft spot for Gangs of New York, even though I think it's a flawed movie in a lot of ways. And then obviously like Goodfellas and Taxi Driver, like Raging Bull. I mean, this stuff is nuts. Just the sheer amount of great movies that this guy has. I think for me, I'm going to lean Casino. I think in terms of Scorsese mob epics, I think Casino hangs together best. I think it has the best performances. I think it has the cleanest, most sort of striking direction. I think even when he was doing Goodfellas, there was some raw and unpolished stuff in there. And I think all those edges got burnished beautifully when he did Casino. A part of me wants to say The Departed, but I feel like The Departed becomes too much of a showcase for actors' antics, whereas Casino is just an absolute Swiss watch of a movie. Has all of the sort of moral hallmarks of Martin Scorsese movies. And of course, Joe Pesci at his arguable best. And he is never better than when working with Scorsese. I'm going to say Casino as my top Scorsese movie.
Okay.
Nice. Ron, what's your favorite Scorsese? Are you gonna stick with Color of Money?
I don't know, man. It's so hard. That is one of my. It just jumps out at me because it's something that I enjoyed so much. What about you, Ed? Where are you leaning?
I mean, Bill stole mine, so I don't know. If you had asked me 20 years ago, oh my god, when I was like an angsty, like almost teen or whatever, or teen whatever, asshole guy, I probably would have said Taxi Driver, because I really feel that Taxi Driver is this kind of statement about life in a way. And it's like one of the only movies where I knew intuitively, even as a younger person watching the movie, that this was not the filmmaker's eyes that I was seeing the movie through. This was Travis Bickle's eyes. I knew when they were showing me what Travis Bickle was seeing. Like sometimes they would like pan across like the black pimps, and I'm like, that's Travis White Boy Bickle looking at these pimps and going, I'm better than them, even though I stay out all night and I take them in their hoes and I'm part of their economy, but I'm better than them. I'm from the Midwest. I went to war. You know what I mean? There's all sorts of shots in that movie that are like from Travis Bickle's point of view, and then the times that Scorsese kind of brings us out and lets us watch Travis Bickle, like the time when he calls Sybil Shepherd's character up on the phone and he's like, hey girl, I know I messed up and blah blah. The camera pans away, or rather it glides, dollies away from him and shoots down a hallway because we're embarrassed for Travis. We can't watch him during that point, and it rolls down the fucking hallway away to give him some time to be a loser by himself. There's just a billion moments like that in Taxi Driver that are like speaking such intense film language that like I said, 20 years ago, I would have said that that's the best one, because it's a poem. But Casino, my man, it's fucking perfect. Bill had it all down. It's like the Busby Berkeley version of a giant gangster movie. It's like the best sets, the best costumes, the best everything, but without all the song and dance. It was like if you could dress everybody perfectly and choreograph everything perfectly, but do it as a documentary somehow. That's what fucking Casino is. It's amazing.
It should not be forgotten that Casino is very much a true story. Like all the characters are lightly fictionalized, but all that stuff actually happened. And to like give it both like the verve and, like you said, that sort of Busby Berkeley bigger than life quality, while still adhering fairly closely to the facts and sort of the gross, scummy, bloody history of the thing. What a weird achievement, right? Like it has this gloss and this panache and this style, and by the same time, by the same token, it's horrifying and disgusting and like, damn, what a movie. I kind of want to go
And-
watch it.
And on top of that, you're not even sure who's more horrible, the corporation or the gangsters, because
Well,
they're
that's the thing.
both
Yeah.
fucking terrible.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and it does such interesting stuff, right? Like there's no reason for you to root for Lefty Rosenthal or what's his name whatever his name is in the movie.
Yeah, his real name was Tony Spilotro, Tony the Ant.
Well,
But,
no, De Niro's
yeah.
character. There's
Oh,
no
no,
reason
yeah.
to root for
Yeah.
Ace Rothstein in the
Ace
movie.
Rothstein, yeah.
Except for the fact that you bring in Pesci's character based on Tony Spilotro,
Mhm.
and now suddenly De Niro's character is caught between essentially on one hand like the Nevada Gaming Commission, which in another movie could have been the heroes because they're trying to get the mob out of Vegas, but in this
Mhm.
movie they're the worst. And then the corporations who are trying to come in to bulldoze also trying to get the mob out of Vegas, and for that in this movie they're the worst. But then on the other side for De Niro is the mob in the form of Pesci, and he's even worse. And like it just creates this inescapable tension for the De Niro character because it's like, oh God, what is this guy gonna do? And in the meantime, like he's making all this money, but like in a way that Goodfellas kind of revels in the making of the money. Casino, from the beginning, you're like, oh no, this is not gonna end well. And I don't know, man. Like it's just a high wire act of a movie, and they just nail every part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's pretty fucking fantastic. Oh, and just last things last about it for me. The thing it really does is show you that everybody's a fucking gang. The Nevada Gaming Commission is just a dumb gang of hicks. Their uniform is the sheriff's uniform and the corporate business suit, and that's their uniform for these dumb fucking backwards hicks out in the desert. We brought you this money. Fucking Bugsy Siegel and all those fools and Meyer Lansky and them literally made Vegas up as a fucking idea out of their heads for it to be the Wild Wild West, the last bastion of total Sodom and Gomorrah. We built this place so that we could rob the populace. We built this almost like a company town that
and they would enjoy it.
They built it so they could rob the people. You build the game preserve so you can shoot the fucking deer. And here comes some assholes. Here comes the people in your own organization who go, well, no, I think we could make this legit and start paying taxes and shit. And I think we should be upstanding citizens. I think we should be on TV. And I think we should do this. I think we should do that. And the gangsters who put them in their place is like, I put you there to be this legit figure so that we could do illegitimate shit. Like, what the fuck are you doing on TV? You know what I mean? Like Ace Rothstein, I can see where Rothstein's coming from. He wanted to establish an identity for himself outside of illegality. He saw himself having legit, as in legitimate, value. And they insisted upon putting the criminality of what he was doing. The bookmaking isn't inherently criminal. It's the people that make the organizations that are inherently criminal. They criminalized his skill. So that's why you root for Rothstein so much. He did a criminal act. He got really great at it, but then they kept sullying his skill. As his skill got more legitimate, and he tried to be more legitimate, they kept coming in and doing all this shit that was gonna fucking mess that up. And to a certain extent, you can get their point of view of, you're a gangster, stupid. You're a small level one with a small wiener and no power, but you are a gangster. And he's going, no, 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 no. And it's all about how, like, none of those people could really see themselves. And even when you see, last things last, even when Robert De Niro's character tries to see himself as what he is, a rich guy who has to buy a broad, he goes and tries to buy the best broad he can. And he buys the best looking broad, but the worst person in the history of the fucking world.
Oh,
so
he's so hateable in that movie.
You know, he tries to make his world this picture perfect place where you can just buy you a hot woman. But a lot of those women who are able to be bought, not to be mean to them or mean to sex workers or any of that stuff, but a lot of the people you can buy fucking suck. And she sucked. And she ruined his, like, her and Tony Spilotro or homeboy from the movie, whatever his name is. I read the book, so it's in my head.
Nicky Santoro, I think.
Nicky Santoro, yes. Nicky and her and homeboy having a stupid, goofy triangle love affair brought down a whole city and got it replaced with and a wiretap in Kansas City near the Salamis. Those two things in conjunction brought the whole thing down. Something that's been it's just, I don't know. It's just epic on a lot of levels. If you haven't seen Casino, please fucking watch that shit.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's it's we've been talking about Casino and basically Scorsese for probably 15 minutes. We talked about Spielberg for about 4.5 minutes. But I want to say this. It does seem like a lot of Scorsese stuff, not all of it, but a portion of the stuff that he's truly involved with comes from real life stuff. Now, almost nothing Spielberg does comes from real life, right? Besides Private Ryan, Schindler's List.
You'd be surprised.
Dude,
Schindler's
yeah.
List, Color Purple is people's
Oh, you're right.
reminiscences.
You're right.
You know,
Spielberg-
Amistad, fucking Lincoln, fucking
Catch Me If You
Warhorse.
Can.
Catch Me If You
Oh,
Can.
that's a good point. Good point.
He's doing a
So
lot.
we really are a lot alike.
Munich.
Empire of the Sun.
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't
Warhorse
know he made
is
that.
based on a true story. Bridge
He
of
did
Spies.
Warhorse? Man,
Yeah.
I didn't even realize Spielberg has done
Post?
so many movies. That's crazy.
Ready Player One, Our Present Reality.
Yeah. Yeah, it will be.
Well, I mean, yeah, man. Like Spielberg, I'm telling you, Spielberg makes 2 movies over and over again, and they're really good. But one is like finding the saccharine sweet in the horror of history, and the other is like sci-fi chase movie, rinse and repeat. I'm actually really interested to see how West Side Story is going to go because it is neither one of those things, and Spielberg has a somewhat spotty history when he gets outside of those 2 formulas.
I mean, Ariel was watching, I've never seen West Side Story, so I can't know this. But Ariel was watching the preview and she was like, is this the same movie?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's
because he's basically doing almost a complete exact remake is what it seems like.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're
So-
doing the songs. I believe they're using the Broadway book. Like, it's not like he's reinventing the movie. It's just he's making it with his Spielbergian flourishes, which might be a little hubristic if we're being real. But
Boy.
Anyway.
I'm going to go watch it. I know that.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely fucking not. Like, if that thing was playing on the inside of my eyeballs, I would gouge them the fuck out. I am not going to watch some When You're a Jet, You're a High Flying Jet shit ever again. The 60s, that's fine. That sensibility, the sort of Puerto Ricans are our stand-ins for the other minorities we hate. I get it. But bro, I fucking despise the simplicity of that love story right now. Like right now, that love story literally makes no sense and isn't even a barrier. Like right now in New York, I could get on the subway and see any number of interracial couples in that persuasion. So I'm being an asshole about it, but honestly, I don't even like the story. Romeo and Juliet works because they were simple fucking rubes and they were 13. These people are like 26 in a modern world.
I mean, they're supposed to be teenagers. They never play that way, but
yeah, but Romeo and Juliet were like 13. You know what I'm saying? I can
hear
see them being the type of dumbass rubes. You have sex one time, it turns your ass out. You know, you're ready to ruin your whole family. But freaking, come on, they're 18 and reasonably attractive in New York, for Christ.
I'm with you on that. I do think that outside of the context of the 60s, you know, the star-crossed lovers from 2 different races is a little bit of a like I don't understand why that's necessary at the moment.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Everybody should see the original West Side Story, though. It's a great movie.
It is. It definitely is better than fucking Grease. Shots fired, musical wise. Shots fired. But the original West Side Story shits on Grease's fucking head.
I mean, Grease is fun, but it is there's no nothing to it. There's no nothing to it.
Nothing to it. That's funny as hell.
It's dumb. I mean, it's fine. I have a good time watching Grease. Don't get me wrong, but it's fucking Grease.
Wait a minute. Let's organize here. Okay.
Yes.
So we gotta actually do top 3 Spielberg movies for each of us and top 3 Scorsese movies for each of us. Obviously, the tops of me and Bill's Scorsese list is motherfucking Casino. Okay, boom. So what's number 2? I'll go Bill. Bill, what's number 2 for Scorsese, and you next, Ron?
Okay.
You know, I think I'm going to go Departed. I think number 2 would be Departed, and I think number 3 for me is probably Wolf of Wall Street.
Nice.
I feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, that's a little bit more of a modern list. And I'll just so you could give it a little bit of stall time, Ron. I'll go Casino. I'll go Goodfellas because I'm a straight basic bitch. Because one thing I do like about Goodfellas is it personalized the so-called gangster story in a way that even Casino didn't do. That sort of personal, like, this is the reason why I got trapped up in this. Nobody's a dumbass. Nobody thinks that being a gangster isn't the parts that they show you are fun. The wearing the stuff, and it's always somebody else who got shot. Tony fucked up nose got shot. Not Tony Cool Clothes. I'm Tony Cool Clothes. I don't get shot. I handle money. Me and my girl go to the Copa. We don't get hurt. We hurt other people. Oh, that dumb asshole down the street, that Mook, he got hurt. You know, who goes to jail? Who goes to jail? You know what? Stick up man. And they go to fall asleep in the car. That sort of life of like pounding it into your head that you're impervious and you're not going to lose. It's the same as like Crip and Blood and all this type of shit. It's just another flavor of that sort of child soldier shittiness that grown-ups do. Grown-ups take people who don't know that they have something to lose because they're so young, they have nothing to lose, and make them do all these acts and ruin them into these fucked up criminals that end up going to jail forever. And thinking going to jail is a fun thing to do and cutting onions with a fucking razor blade and shit, like a lifestyle shit. They get you when you're young and your head's still soft and pound these idiotic values into you. And you see enough evidence that your dad, who's a post office worker, has a worse car than this guy who beats people up. It's just a fact of life in your neighborhood. So something about him presenting that case of these people aren't idiots. These people aren't evil. These people aren't monsters. Sometimes they just show you the gold when you're susceptible to it. So I love that about Goodfellas. So that'd be my number two. So we got Casino and Goodfellas. What's your number two, Ron? Fucking Cape Fear. Are you gonna go all the studio pictures? What are we gonna do here?
The king of comedy. That's Ron.
Age of Innocence,
Yes.
motherfucker. Is that what we're gonna do?
Wow,
I mean, look,
Age of Innocence.
I think I'm gonna go Wolf of Wall Street.
Okay.
Nah, you guys are too modern.
Look,
Listen,
man,
man, go ahead, Ron.
Go ahead. I mean, basically, like, I just had a good time watching this movie at the same time that you're like, holy shit, these people are piles of fucking garbage who are ruining people's lives while also like crazy ass clowns who are having the best fucking time of their lives. It's just super interesting.
You know what I think happened to me with Wolf of Wall Street? I shit you not. I was working in basically Wolf of Wall Street. We were a call center that was like straight up underground, and we were calling people and selling them garbage that sucked. And I saw my coworkers take Wolf of Wall Street seriously as like a training manual for life.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And I wanted to put a gun in my mouth. You know what I mean?
The
Like,
same thing.
Like, you know what I mean?
What was that Ben Affleck one? Boiler Room?
Which was
Remember
just a pale kill me clone with 15 heads of Glengarry Glen Ross.
Yes,
So,
and
Yeah.
I was working at MCI, and this is when I quit. The guy came in, I'd seen it, and then the guy came in and was like, "Have you guys watched Boiler Room? You got to learn from that movie." And I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna quit this job. That's it. That's it." So yes, they are piles of garbage, but I like how they highlighted how bad they are, what people do to manipulate other people. It's almost like giving information out to people who wouldn't get that information otherwise. Like really, through entertainment, there are people who are going to watch a movie like that and be more suspicious when someone calls their house offering them junk bonds and bullshit. They're going to be like, "Nah, dude, I saw Wolf of Wall Street. No," and they're going to hang up their phone. And that's
point.
what needs to happen. I mean, that's important.
Nice.
Honestly.
To me, that and The Big Short were probably the two most instructive movies about that type of shit. And I'm glad they came out somewhere around each other. So like I said, if I didn't have that experience, I'd probably be with you on the Wolf of Wall Street train. My third one, another basic bitch choice, is Taxi Driver for the reasons I said before. Rewind the tape and listen to why I think Taxi Driver is the shit. And again, and I'm one of these people, I hate to drag this in all the time, but I am an African American. I've talked to fucking Paul Schrader. Talked to Paul Schrader, and I asked him point blank, "Is Travis Bickle a racist?" And he said, "Of course he is."
Yeah.
And I was like, And I was like, well, and you felt that was like important. Why did you think that was important? And he was like, it's because he was so marginalized. He had to find somebody else to marginalize more. He had to find somebody to force into being less than him. And I just really wish that some of these Rittenhouse cocksuckers would watch Taxi Driver for 5 seconds and see that that's where they're going with a billion times more information, a billion times more, opportunity to be around different people and have different thoughts. And they're still going this Taxi Driver direction of marginalizing people, getting weird shit in their head, becoming weird incels. Travis Bickle was in fucking De Niro's body in the 70s and couldn't get no ass. That's all in your head, bro. That's all in your head. You know what I'm saying? So like, I wish young people would watch Taxi Driver as a bit of instructive. Do not do this. Do not get obsessed with guns. Do not get obsessed with being by yourself and doing push-ups in the dark. Do not be obsessed with women as prizes to be earned to the point where you'll shoot the president to get her attention and shit. Don't do none of that shit, man. So that's why I think Taxi Driver is invaluable, honestly, besides its cinematic triumphs.
Listen, we've been saying that these guys set the template for 20th century and certainly 21st century cinema. I mean, Taxi Driver is the original Fight Club. It really is.
Yep. Basically. All right. So now Spielberg. My very first one is Jaws. What was yours?
I don't get a third. I don't get a third.
Oh, my bad. Well, I'll cut that out. Ron, what's your third Scorsese?
It's gonna be Raging Bull. I'm just a sucker for a good one. I'm just a sucker for a good sports movie, but I love the way. I mean, I love the thing that made him a great boxer is the thing that ruined his life, and I love that. I love when the thing you're good at is also the thing that ruins things. It's almost like when you're a comedian and you can't stop fucking joking, and the person you're with is like, okay, you can't fucking joke literally all of the time. Bad shit is happening. Do not make fun of this, right? And I've seen people ruin their whole lives doing that sort of thing. So I loved that central story of this raging anger is the same thing that made him successful, is the same thing that ruined his life. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah.
That's a great choice, dude. All right. So now we move on to Spielberg, and let's get a nice little talking about Spielberg chunk, because we have been blowing Scorsese some fierce. I think the Italian Defamation League is going to give us a fucking award for this.
For it. Let's go, baby.
Okay.
Hey, Costanzo, what do you fucking think of this guy, huh? Okay, sorry.
He's all right. He's okay.
So we said, as far as Spielberg, my top one is Jaws. Bill, what's your top one?
My top one was Jurassic Park.
Jurassic
I believe
Park.
Ron's was too.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you both. I think Jurassic Park is my second one. So what's your second one?
Okay. I feel pretty strongly. I think it's a lesser appreciated Spielberg, but to me, everything about this movie just works. And it's a great example of how he can do these movies without it coming across saccharine, and that is Minority Report. I think Minority Report is another one of those. I used it to describe Casino. I'll use it here. A Swiss watch of a movie. Everything in it works. Everything in it it contributes to it, the sum of the parts make a whole that's even better than each individual part. I think from the production design to the cinematography to the performances, like that movie creates an immersive near future sci-fi world that is one of the most believable I've ever seen on film, even though you're dealing with crazy stuff like, telepathy and future projection, which has no basis in reality whatsoever. But the way it explores sort of the moral implications of how that society is constructed is some of the most sophisticated work that Spielberg has ever done in that respect. And also, it's just a movie with no fat whatsoever. The mystery works, the chase works, the clever gags work, the set pieces work. Everything in that movie just works. I can watch that movie a dozen times and be entertained every single time. and take away something substantial from sort of a moral philosophical point of view. So Minority Report, I think that's a phenomenal movie.
Oh, nice. We're getting into the weird shit now, baby. All right, Ron, what's yours? AI? What the fuck? Sugarland Express? What are we doing here?
Dude, I really do like AI, though. I really like that movie.
Definitely one to talk about when we're talking about the lesser efforts of each director.
Yes.
You son of a bitch.
No, dude, I like it too. I like it too, but that movie does some weird stuff, and it has a very weird backstory.
Then wait till we get to the adventures of fucking Tintin, bro.
Oh,
You know what? But did he direct that one too?
Oh, he directed it.
Oh, I thought he just produced that shit.
No.
Okay. Look, I'm gonna go with the Indiana Jones that you're probably not supposed to like the best, and it's The Last Crusade. I love Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. I don't care. Holy shit. He also did Hook.
Dude, you just stole my number 3. Come on, Ron.
Oh, shit. Sorry.
So yours is your number 3 is Hook, Bill.
I gotta put it up there just because I love that frickin' movie, and it obviously hit me at the exact right time when I was a child. But I do think that movie again just does some weird stuff so well. And like, look, I get that it's probably not the third best movie that Spielberg's ever made, not by a long shot. And a part of me wants to put Saving Private Ryan on the list just so we have some representation for his sort of harrowing historical dramas. But man, I love Hook. And I don't know how else to say that. So I'm going to just say Hook is my number 3 for better or for worse.
Dude, so how many did we do all of yours, Ron?
No.
We did. Indiana Jones is your second one.
Yeah.
Right. And what's your third one?
I'm going to go with Schindler's List just because it's a movie that touches you and it's fucking great. It's amazing.
I mean, that's pretty good. I am, of course, I'm going to split my vote because I can do that. Damn it! My one vote, obviously, is for Jaws. Second one is obviously Jurassic Park because I'm basic. But the first, 25 minutes of Saving Private Ryan are fucking harrowing, and they are a singular cinematic achievement. They really are. That it's the most immersive battle shit I've seen ever, period. And I don't think it'll ever be surpassed. The naked documentary style horror of watching a guy walking along the beach, picking up his arm matter of factly and sort of wandering off. You know what I'm saying? Guy gets shot in his helmet, looks at the hole in his helmet and goes, I survived, and gets shot in his head while he's looking at his helmet. I mean, just the horror, the first 3 rows of guys will get murdered as soon as the door opens. And there's 8 rows of guys. So you got to get over your dead buddies. Ugh. I mean, dude, when I was a young man, I used to be like, after Saving Private Ryan, you should never have a problem talking to a girl. There ain't nothing scary about your life. These damn Wierzbowskis and Wanakis and shit who are getting the shit shot out of them in fucking World War II at 17. You ain't got to do nothing but go to football practice, fatty.
Well, and you know what it is, though? Spielberg is one of the best directors of all time when it comes to business. And business is sort of Hollywood slang for just making the actors do something that isn't the main thrust of the scene. So it's not like we're just standing here talking. Famously, Jaws is full of these walk and talk shots with these long takes where it's like they're moving through town. At one point, they get on a boat and the camera stays with them as the boat goes from one shore to the other shore. But even beyond that, just giving the actors things to do that just communicate character and help drive the plot. Little things to play with in their hands, little moments of something clever or something unexpected to just punch up scenes. Spielberg does that better than any other director. And he does that to horrifying effect in those first 25 minutes of Saving Private Ryan. Just everything you're talking about, Ed, finding those little moments of humanity just to make you feel how awful everything is. Good God, is that effective?
And the emotional turn, real quick, at the end of that scene, spoilers for a billion-year-old movie, but like when the Americans get up to the places, to the shit,
The
let me take that
bunkers.
again. Yeah, when the Americans get up to the bunkers and they flamethrower those guys and they grenade those guys to death, you don't go, yeah, you go, oh fuck.
Yeah.
This whole thing is terrible. These guys who are just the victims of this assault are now burning people alive and blowing them up in holes. And it's like, none of this is good. You don't get any, if you're a guy of a certain age, one of that John Wayne bullshit, you don't get any of that cowboy swell in your chest from the war bullshit. It's all bad across all sides, and all you want to do is get somebody home. And okay, how about this for esoteric weird ass picks for the third one? I would be basic like Ron and do the Last Crusade. I really want to do that. I really do, because Last Crusade, Bill, you just didn't get the magic, and I understand. I don't know. Trust me, I get not getting the magic. Trust me, I do.
Sure.
But I think I'm going to disqualify it because of how much pathos and mythos and whatever oses from the Greeks that it had from the other movies. Like, it has the weight of us having seen this another couple times, and the weight of it being this cap, an end cap on a epic. Because there hasn't been another one, has there? You know what I'm saying? It has all
we'll
that.
We'll be talking about that.
But I'll tell you what I like, and this is going to come out of fucking nowhere, but that goddamn War of the Worlds. Look, that War of the Worlds is my shit, because it just had I got to get my fucking kids from Jersey to like Vermont or whatever the fuck. He just had to get his kids from here to here. And the fucking world ending, well, that's just another obstacle in my thing from taking my kids here to here and keeping it focused on that guy who had that simple quest. All this majesty and motherfuckers getting blown up by space rays and the aliens coming down and all that shit. It just had something, man. Spielberg elevated that. I thought that was fucking good.
I mean, dude, I would argue that the first half hour of War of the Worlds is comparable to Saving Private Ryan. It's just in a sci-fi context. But that idea of like placing you right viscerally in the middle of something going down that makes you go, oh my God. Like, from the moment the crowd gathers around the hole in the street to the moment that they're driving away and the bridge blows up behind them. I mean, not only is that just some outstanding effects work, but the direction just places you in the middle of an alien attack probably better. Like, Roland Emmerich wishes he could have made that movie. I mean, it is the movie. War of the Worlds does not end well, the Spielberg version, even though I can argue there's some redeeming qualities about how it ends, and it is very true to the books. But damn, does that movie start on all cylinders? It's so a good choice.
I gotta split. Like those pieces of it are cohesive enough to make it my last choice to be the Saving Private Ryan and that. I think that just shows what a bravura filmmaker he is. You know what I mean? But he doesn't quite stick the landing on either of those projects, in my personal opinion.
I think that's correct, but I also think that looking at those pieces in isolation also show you that like Spielberg can be grossly unsentimental. And I just think we would do well to keep that in mind. It's like he gets this reputation of being a very saccharine filmmaker, but that is not really the character of a lot of his work.
Dude, I was telling my girlfriend about that scene. I don't think she's ever seen Saving Private Ryan. And no, I was telling her and my other buddy about the scene, and I'm not even gonna you out of context. I won't spoil it, but the scene where the German guys got the knife and he's just inexorably gonna. That scene is like twice as harrowing as most action scenes in most any other movie. I mean, I don't think I can think of one that is affecting me more like viscerally right now thinking about it than that.
Let me just say this. I don't know if you could come up with a Martin Scorsese scene that would affect you as viscerally as that. Think about that one.
It's certainly one to think about. So so that's our representation for the stuff that we personally as weirdos like about each of these filmmakers, and we have talked about each of their oeuvres and jazz like that. Now we must get to their lesser efforts.
Yeah.
Let us talk about their lesser efforts, and towards the end of that, we're going to talk about switching lesser efforts, or rather switching and doing a different material, whether it's a lesser effort or a bigger effort, doesn't really matter. I'll leave that up to you guys. But let's start. So that's a little cherry on the top for us. But let's start with their lesser efforts. How do you want to approach it? Lesser efforts that suck or lesser efforts that's good? Because I'll just throw War of the Worlds out there as a lesser effort that's good. We have
Totally.
AI on somebody's plate, and
Yeah.
AI, much like Ready Player One, motherfuckers is fucking dolls all over the place and staying in virtual reality right now. You know what I mean? He was on that shit.
Yeah, man, I think this is a really interesting conversation because they look, let's get it out of the way. I mean, both of these guys have made bombs, right? So Spielberg made 1941, the only time he ever tried to do a straight up comedy, starring of all people John Belushi, and the movie's a piece. I've never seen it, but by all accounts, the movie's a piece of crap. Spielberg has also, turned in some dubious effort. He did the first Jurassic Park sequel, The Lost World. I don't even know how that came out of Spielberg. Like, that movie is very pedestrian. Empire of the Sun, I have never been able to make it through that movie, even though it's the debut of a young Christian Bale. I mean, that is just a slog of a movie with very little to capture my personal attention. So I don't know. I'll just throw those three out as sort of like the bottom of the barrel for Spielberg. Like, he's made movies that are not super watchable.
Well, and The Adventures of Tintin.
I will defend that movie. And if you want to hear it, I'll do it right now.
Please do it. I want to hear your defense.
So
I did not think it was good, but I also, what do I know?
I just don't fuck with Hergé. I see them old drawings. I don't fuck with Hergé like that. I don't need to belabor it. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm just going to say, I mean, The Adventures of Tintin, I wouldn't argue as being a great movie. However, the one thing that Spielberg did in that movie was kind of the same thing that Scorsese did in Hugo, which is Spielberg is the master of the moving master shot, the one take shot where he designs and follows action in the most dynamic way possible. We were talking a little bit about it before, where, it's a little bit of him using business with the actors to move, without moving the camera. You move the actors into close-up, you move the mise-en-scène, and then you start to move the camera and it's moving with the actors and you explore the space. And Spielberg does that better than almost anybody. The Adventures of Tintin, using a digital camera in a digital world, I don't think you really notice it if you're not looking for it, but there are some shots in that movie where the choreography of what's happening in the scene and how the camera is moving is literally mind-blowing. And again, as somebody who, does sequential art and has done storyboards and knows what it takes to design action, good Lord, the action design in The Adventures of Tintin, you have to watch it just to appreciate that. I implore anybody, remove yourself from having to love the characters because it's going to be hard to do. Just watch the action design. It's unfriggin' believable in that movie.
Okay.
Yeah, I bet that's true.
All right. As far as that goes, like Spielberg, I guess you could argue, even though it did very, very well, technically, the Crystal Skull.
I will not defend that one.
Yeah, it's up there. And you know what? He didn't direct Goonies. I was about to say, we have had a giant oversight. He didn't direct it. He just infected it with his whatever.
And Temple of Doom.
Listen, I mean, Spielberg has a track record of very lackluster sequels. You've got Temple of Doom, you've got Jurassic Park: The Lost World, and like you were just saying, Ron, we've got what were we just talking about? Wow, mind blank.
Crystal Skull and
Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
But so I think, I don't know. I a lot of his newer stuff that's harder edged, like Munich and stuff, it is lesser, but it is good. So I'm not going to count that as lesser. I'm not going to count, like, this is a rough one.
I will say, I mean, Spielberg's been in a weird, I don't even want to call it a funk, but he's been doing more of these historical dramas, and I feel like they keep getting less interesting. Like,
Yeah, Oh yeah, War Horse. We talked about
War
earlier.
Horse, Bridge of Spies, The Post. I mean, Lincoln is a really well done movie, but it's not like, oh man, did you see that Lincoln? Good Lord. Like, he's almost become very formalistic in his old age.
And it's also like he's one of those nerds who's like, man, you know what the coolest shit is? Fucking Lincoln. Let's talk about it. That's
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a nerd who's like, man, people are gonna find this so interesting. And it's like, no, dude, 17 people find that interesting who are history buffs, and you didn't make it any different or do anything exciting. Like, I don't know, look at the women in Lincoln's life or something like that. I don't know, something where it's like unique and a little bit different. You know what I mean? Like
he's got a weird formal streak to him. I think. Yeah. It's just like this is the way you take apart this and blah blah down to the point where he's doing a basically formulaic musical right now.
Yeah.
And then he's doing a biopic of his own life. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, God.
Oh, he's doing a biopic of his own life?
He's doing a biopic of his own life. Seth Rogen's playing his uncle that introduced him to film and shit. It's not his life. It's not like the Stevie Spielberg story, but it's like how Neil Simon would write about his fucking self all the time.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that's kind of
fictionalized, but I would agree with that, Ed. I mean, the thing that I think redeems Munich is Munich still has a lot of that same sort of unpredictable kind of crackling verve in the directing style that is just not really present. Like he's almost taken his love of business and moving master shots and like, the gorgeous Janusz Kaminski photography and like just made it this very sort of like pleasant, well-mannered sort of country club experience in his movies now. It's like you don't get. There was a certain amount of punk rock that the Spielberg, especially of like the 80s and the 90s when he was really at the height of his powers, like he just did audacious stuff, and that carried into the 2000s. And I feel like he's just lost that. He's really embraced his role as like the old man of cinema.
That's not good.
Yeah, it's not. It just isn't.
Yeah, I can't. You know what? The only one of his movies, honestly, really just I can't stand this. Besides that Hergé shit, is I think AI, man. I don't know that I can stand it, man, because it's kind of garish in the same way that Ready Player One is. In regards to like when you just look at it, it doesn't look that great. It looks like this gobbledygook world that's neither fish nor fowl. It gets Uncanny Valley out the wazoo. The whole fucking thing has this Uncanny Valley thing, which I get that he's going for in the Pinocchio aspect of and the Kubrickian parts of it, and him. I just felt like he was laboring under something, which when you look into it, he was laboring under the ghost of Kubrick. He was carrying on like one of the last cinematic geniuses. He was carrying the football across the goal line for a cinematic genius who had just gained 98 yards. You know what I'm saying? And he was carrying it across the goal line, and he's just like, I got to score this touchdown for Coobs. Yeah. And it just sucked because he was trying to win one for the Gipper the whole time. And I just didn't feel anything for that movie. And I didn't feel that it's something the Eternals had too, where it's like, there's a character that cannot die and cannot be beat and will outlast us all. And you never get the gravitas of how lonely that is. And you're supposed to. You're supposed to get all this gravitas of how lonely the lonely immortal sit on a pile of dad bones, at the end of time. You're supposed to get that. And I didn't. I never got it at any point in AI.
That ending does it for me. I'll just say.
Yeah.
The ending does it for me in AI.
Yeah, I agree.
To each their own. By that time, the sex bot and Jude Law and the blah, 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 I just got out of the world by that time, and I didn't. The toy grudge match place with the junkyard.
I'm with you on all that. I'm with you on all that. It's a hard movie to watch, which is a weird thing to say about a Spielberg movie because even movies that are not great, like he just has that panache that he makes it interesting or fun to watch.
Yeah.
And that movie is not. And it's,
I mean, dude,
right.
Color Purple is low-key fun to watch, and it's fucking horrifying.
Yeah.
Everything that's happening to that lady is horrifying, and Whoopi Goldberg's acting her ass off, and so is, frankly, Danny Glover. Danny Glover and Whoopi Goldberg could go on tour forever with those roles. I mean, they're just amazing. But god damn, that movie is too easy to watch for that horrible shit that's going on, and it's just that Spielberg under it.
Well, and I mean, I would imply that on the opposite hand to something like Catch Me If You Can, which is just one of the most frivolous movies imaginable that really consists of nothing but people talking in rooms, and yet it just moves and it crackles and it's interesting. And again, it's just Spielberg knows how to make a movie and he knows how to make it fun. And yeah, that just does not come through in AI. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. And I also don't fuck with The Terminal. I don't get it. It's so forced whimsy in the modern age. It's like if you made that movie 7 years before The Terminal got made, you could see the world. You know what I mean? Sometime before 9/11.
What's it?
It's a guy who gets he comes over. He's like a Russian or something. He comes over. His visa's fucked up. He has to live in the airport for like ever, and he makes all these friendships and has this whole slice of life shit with all the people that he meets in the airport because they become like this big family and yada yada yada. I will never like shit like that. I don't think I'll ever like shit like that.
Yeah, I mean that was essentially Spielberg trying to do a Billy Wilder movie, right? Like that's the sort of like comedy of manners that you get in the 60s that would have been very revolutionary because it's, you know, sort of portraying the low culture and people who normally aren't the stars of movies. And like, you know, if Jack Lemmon played that role in 1966, like we'd look back on it and be like, wow, that was a watershed moment in cinema. And yeah, coming out in the mid 2000s, it just sort of feels like, oh, that's pleasant enough. That's cheeky and fun, I guess.
And it's like applying a bazooka to kill a fly, like Spielberg being used to tell a story that basically Kevin Smith could have directed. It was just wild to me, like you know, using a sledgehammer to kill a bug. You know,
I think you just insulted Kevin Smith.
Kevin Smith knows that he's not known for Spielbergian movement of camera or no shit like that.
I'm joking.
You know what I'm saying? He would agree. He'd be like, "Yeah, bro." You know, he did some weed and totally agree with what I just said. Yeah, man, I agree about the flick, man. You know, he would totally say that.
He really would.
Okay, so that being the case, we said the low ones. What's the low Scorsese?
Ooh. I mean, obviously, the king of comedy is not good.
I think the king of comedy and New York aren't received well, but I don't know that they're that bad.
Really?
Same thing with After Hours. After Hours is a weird movie that I don't really like, but it just seems so weird and so self-assured in its weirdness. But I don't like it. I consider that one lower Scorsese. I consider Cape Fear lower Scorsese. As much verve as he puts into that fucking thing, it's not good. You couldn't call it good.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I will say this. I have not seen a lot of the lesser Scorsese efforts. So things like New York, or After Hours. I actually don't think I've seen The King of Comedy either.
Have you seen Shutter Island? Because that goes on there too, to me. Shutter Island is there.
Shit. I do not understand. People love that movie. I don't freaking get that.
Shutter Island sucks ass.
Yeah, dude. If you're a Shutter Island stan, you got some problems in your life, man. Like, get better taste.
It's a weird movie.
Get better taste. It's a weird movie, but it's also so predictable. Like, there's nothing in that movie that you don't see coming, which is just a weird thing in a Scorsese movie. I don't know.
Yeah,
don't get me.
Absolutely, it's not alive in the same way as most Scorsese stuff is. You know what I mean? So yeah, I count that as that. Anybody seen Kundun? I know it's long and very Bernardo Bertolucci-esque and stuff. I haven't seen it all the way through, but I cannot put it on the low scale just because it's boring to a guy who reads comic books instead of real books. I can't do that.
Well, so I have not seen Kundun, but one of the quote unquote lower Scorsese efforts that we mentioned earlier that I want to bring back into the conversation is Bringing Out the Dead, which was written by Paul Schrader, who famously was the author of, or the screenwriter of Taxi Driver, and is currently on a hot streak right now. Like, if you haven't seen some of his most recent films, I believe Scorsese just produced the one with Oscar Isaac, The Card Counter. But Paul Schrader also wrote First Reformed with Ethan Hawke, which was just a great movie. I mean, this dude has had sort of a resurgence in his career that is worth paying attention to. But Bringing Out the Dead was at a low point in his career where him and Scorsese had both, kind of been up and down, and they got together for this movie and it was not well received. But I remember watching that in theaters and kind of being blown away by it. It's Nicolas Cage acting the Nicolas Cage out of his ass. And he's essentially playing a strung out, drug addicted ambulance worker. And it just follows like a couple days in his life where he's working 3 shifts back to back because the New York City ambulance drivers can't find somebody better, I guess. But it's just all the shit that he goes through as he's essentially going through drug-induced hallucinations while on no sleep, while trying to do his job tending to like people who are going through all sorts of horrible shit in New York City. And it's so stylish in the way that it does it. And that Scorsese, like it feels like this would just be a dour, oppressive movie. And I think in a lot of ways it is, but it's also, it's got that sort of crackle, that verve, that je ne sais quoi that we keep talking about with these two directors. And it's worth watching.
Yeah, I have not seen Silence, so I have to leave it out. I have not seen Silence of Scorsese's canon. Haven't seen it. I'll say.
So here's a question.
Yeah.
Think about this. You have seen all of Spielberg's bad movies, but you haven't seen any of Scorsese's bad movies, pretty much. Why is that?
I think I will say this. I think that they fail for different reasons. I think the quote unquote bad Scorsese movies are movies that are more difficult to watch because he's deliberately trying to do weird things with them. And I think Silence is a great example where that's a movie with Christian missionaries in Japan that features almost no dialogue. And like, that's not the same as Spielberg making a shitty sequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That's a try something experimental and very hard and just not nail it perfectly.
Yeah, well, and I think Bringing Out the Dead is sort of the same thing, and that's a movie that I have seen, but like that's a tough watch. I mean, that's literally watch a drug addict go deal with like murder victims and overdoses with a bunch of like increasingly insane partners. And it's like, that's not a good time at the movies. You know what I mean? And I think say whatever else you want, like Spielberg is, we kind of said it, like Spielberg uses all of the many skills at his disposal to always try to make you have a good time at the movies, even when the subject matter is hard to digest. So that's a huge difference between these guys.
And I just want to talk about one thing instead of just this. I like to talk about the bad movies people made when they were doing exactly what they came to do. And one of those is The fucking Irishman. Now, look, The Irishman is not bad because Scorsese's too good to make anything that's actually bad. But it has all of the flaws that people tried to find in beautiful, perfect things like Casino. It has the flaws that they said Casino had. Oh, it's too unwieldy. It has too much this, it has too much that. Whatever you think Scorsese movies have too much of, it's all in the motherfucking Irishman. down to these sort of these soldiers, for lack of a better word, these soldiers that get created by unions, corporations, gangs, which are all the same thing. And they kind of show you that, like, I mean, Robert De Niro's character in there didn't even have some, back when I was back in my day, He went to war. He learned he had a taste for shooting people in the face, and he would follow orders, especially if they dealt with violence, pretty easily. And when he got out, he was like, I could shoot people at home. This is fucking awesome. And that's the story. That's the story. This guy who discovered that I shoot people good. And when I got to saw off heads and shit, I just kind of do it. I don't really think too much about it. I mean, what? That guy. It's the story of his life. Not the story of fucking Jimmy Hoffa. Not the story of Meyer Lansky or whoever the fuck. Not the story of these big kingpins. Scorsese takes the camera kind of off of them and goes into the shadows and looks at this fucking loser eating a can of beans waiting to drive Jimmy Hoffa to his next stop. And the movie's about him for 4 fucking hours. You know what I mean? That's Scorsese through and through. You know what I mean? So like that is a lower Scorsese to me. And it's one of the ones where he was doing exactly what he came to do. And it didn't quite work. It wasn't a weird, tough watch, a weird experiment with his buddy Paul. That's him with Steve Zalian, an Oscar-winning screenwriter, doing exactly what they came to do, which is make some epic that doesn't feel epic. It just feels long. I saw it in the theater. I peed before, and I saw it at 10 a.m. And the number of walkers clanging against shit as the old people were taking pisses during that movie just ruined the whole fucking thing for me, man. I was not immersed in that movie for 4 hours because the oldsters kept getting up and you know, tennis ball walker in their ass on to take peas during the movie. And it just wasn't that good. But it had everything that his good movies have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting though. I mean, Scorsese has a track record of taking his weird passion projects and turning them into something great. Because I mean, famously, you know, he tried to get Gangs of New York made for 20 years, and finally, sort of hit a time when you know he could get the budget necessary to do it the way he wanted to do it. And again, that's not necessarily one of his greatest movies, but I think in terms of him trying to do that sort of subversive operatic crime epic that he does, that's a great example. I think The Last Temptation of Christ is another one where it's like that was a very uncommercial idea that he fought very hard to get made, and the results are maybe not the greatest movie he's ever made, but it turned out in a way that, you know, I think he should be happy with. I would agree with you, Ed. The Irishman does not fall on that list next to Gangs of New York and The Last Temptation of Christ. It's a miss. It's just a straight up miss.
And I'll just say one last thing on Scorsese. I don't even fucking like The Departed, bro. And I know that's blasphemy around these parts, but I think the nihilism is too strong. When that certain character gets capped, I'm just like, well, what the fuck did I watch all of this for? Why the fuck am I even here? You shoot this guy. This guy who went through all this stuff and got in with the guys and did this, that. This guy gets shot. And then this other I fucking hate this other guy. Why does this guy win? It's just so cynical. I was just like, bro, I needed me a couple teaspoons full of Spielberg at that moment when that happens in that movie. I just got to say that. So yeah, that's just
good. The things have to end good. Ed rears its ugly head.
For how cynical I am, it's crazy that keeps coming back. It's so crazy that keeps coming. You know what it is? It's just like the world fucking sucks. Make it not suck up there with all the lights. Why do I have to pay $15 to see something that makes me feel bad?
You know what's so interesting is I've been reading this thing about fantasy fiction formula writing. All right. And it's Kathy Chester, I think is her name, if I'm remembering correctly. She helped make the Dresden Files because she basically taught Jim Butcher, and Jim Butcher was like, "This is stupid. Having a structure to write a novel is such a dumb idea. I'm going to prove it's dumb by using it and writing a piece of terrible novel." And then he wrote the Dresden Files, the best-selling Dresden Files, and he is now famous for it. So my point being, though, that what she talks about is that your main character should be put through the ringer. The character you're talking about, Ed, should be put through that ringer. But what that's for is that once your character succeeds at the very end, it's cathartic. Because they've been put through the ringer. It looked like they would lose the entire time, and beyond all odds, and because of their own willpower, strength, never giving up, learning whatever they had to learn through those lessons, they then succeed. That makes people like it. And she literally says, if you want to end your book bad, That's fine. Understand that no one will buy your book.
Yeah.
That's what she said. She's right.
Yeah.
As far as bestsellers go, as far as books go. But I think that's also partly true for movies. You're not going to be as successful when you just have a movie that ends shittily. It's going to be good. It can be amazing. It can be a great movie.
There's room for tragedies. Let's keep it real. I do hear what you're saying, Ed. I mean, honestly, the cynicism at the end of The Irishman was almost too much for me, when he's just, dying alone in that nursing home and no one comes to see him on Christmas. Like, I was ready to put a gun in my mouth after that fucking
scene. Yeah, I mean, that probably did affect me a little bit. I think in that one, though, I was like, serves you right, you fucking cocksucker.
Well,
what did you expect?
But that makes it even worse, right? Like, it's like, I mean, just no hope, no redemption. Like, but I think it's worth pointing out, in the spirit of this debate, right? The Scorsese movies that fall a little bit short are the ones that end too bleakly. And we're talking about The Irishman, we're talking about The Departed. I would almost say talking about Bringing Out the Dead. Based on what I know about the movie, and even though I haven't seen it either, Silence, I think, would fit that as well. It's interesting, though, Ron, the Spielberg movies that we talk about as being a little bit lesser, I would argue are the movies that end a little too neatly or end a little too cleanly. War of the Worlds, the reason that movie, and this probably applies to AI as well now that we're talking about it, the reason that movie feels a little hollow at the end of the day is, like, you get to the ending and the happy ending doesn't feel earned at all. It just feels like somebody goes, you know what? This should end happily. And you just tack it on at the end. And it's like, it doesn't ring true. And you look at some of the best Spielberg movies, you look at something like, certainly Schindler's List, but even Jurassic Park, even Jaws, the victories are not total victories. In a lot of ways, those movies end horribly. I mean, Schindler's List, obviously, but like, even you look at Jaws, Quint dies and the shark almost kills everybody and they barely get by the skin of their teeth. And also, there's nothing stopping another shark from coming and doing the exact same thing. Like, that's not a clean, happy ending in the same way of War of the Worlds, where it's like, well, somehow we all just make it to Boston in one piece and our families reunited and the aliens all die and, like, let's hug it out. It's...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would argue that's a problem with the source material, though, on that one, too. But it's picking that source material that has that ending, so...
And you're also allowed to fix that up a little bit if you want to, like we do in Reboot It. Sometimes you look at something and you go, we need to have something that moves people a little bit before the victory. I would agree with that. And
endings are hard. That's all.
They are hard.
Well, I mean, speaking of rebooting it, now comes the time where we reboot a Spielberg movie with Scorsese at the helm, and we reboot a Scorsese movie with Spielberg at the helm. Did I say that the same thing twice?
No, I think you got it.
You said it right.
So it gets all jumbled in there, man. So that being the case, I nominate that we go for good movies, because putting them on each other's bad movies doesn't make sense in this scenario. I'm looking at the bad ones and I'm not interested in talking about none of that shit. But they're good movies. If you were to take one of their good ass movies and make the other one directed, let's try to envision what that would look like. Let's see what we would pick.
See, here's the thing. I almost want to do Casino and Jurassic Park.
Scorsese's Jurassic Park. And Spielberg's Casino.
That's why I'm saying it.
Spielberg could do Casino. Like, let's get it twisted. Spielberg could do Casino. He could. Spielberg, in the same vein as The Post or Bridge of Spies,
right,
could do Casino for sure. Mm-hmm. It'd be a slightly different movie, but I don't know. In a lot of ways, I think it would be a lesser movie. I don't know that Spielberg doing Casino would make Casino better, but he could do it.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm so interested in Scorsese's Jurassic Park, because do we do even more practical effects? do we try to do some kind of claymation, because he's a real film historian, both of them are. But if I were to stack up Scorsese's actual film knowledge against, I think both of them have a fair amount, but both of them could be the only people I know could maybe trounce Tarantino as far as pure knowledge of the beginnings of film, all the way up to their era when they were being educated about it, and then beyond. Because both of them have access to every film in the world. They were both watching Parasite like in 2004. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, the reason I chose that is just because I think it's so off of his normal thing that it's interesting to have him do it. Because, I mean, sure, if we pick Saving Private Ryan, I think Scorsese would do an amazing job on Saving Private Ryan. Like, it would be different as well, but I think he would kill it. Like, he would.
Sure. I mean, I think the only thing that makes that a tough thing to think about is so much of what makes Jurassic Park as great as it is the way it revolutionized movie making at the time, which was very much driven by Spielberg's decisions as the director. And it's like, I think Ed's on the right track here is would Scorsese have made those same decisions? Would Scorsese have committed to doing the all CGI dinosaurs, which was a very unproven, untested, we don't know if it's going to work sort of thing? Or, as in the case with Hugo and the Aviator, would Scorsese have maybe leaned too far, bit off more than he could chew with the CGI, where he didn't really keep as tight a control on things as he could have, which Spielberg famously always does, and maybe it would have turned out shittier for that reason. I don't know. It's a tough thing to think about.
I think Spielberg.
The thing that Scorsese is amazing at, and I think also Spielberg's great at it too, though, is finding someone to do a job and to do it well. So if this was like a thing where someone came to him and said, look, I know you do these types of movies. We want you to do this dinosaur movie. We think you could take the human element and make it really interesting. And we want you to do that, but you're going to have dinosaurs in it. Who do you want to work with? And I think he would come up with someone who would nail it. Don't you think that's possible?
It's tough because I think Scorsese is a little bit more hands-off with his with special effects and post in general. I mean, famously, like, he hands stuff off to Thelma Schoonmaker and lets her go nuts. And we've seen examples of movies where it's like, The Irishman's a great example, right? Where their post-production process was a mess because Scorsese really didn't want to be bothered to do anything on set that would aid them with all that de-aging. And so it became this bloated sort of nonsensical post-process where they were trying to like de-age these guys without any sort of processes in place from the shoot. Without getting too much in the weeds, and Hugo was kind of the same thing where it's like he shot a lot of stuff without really the plan of how they were going to achieve what he wanted to achieve in post. And so it became a ton of trial and error. And it's not like Spielberg, who sort of obsessively plans things to the point where, like we were talking about before, he's become almost this weird, stodgy formalist in his old age. Like, that's one thing you cannot say about Scorsese. Scorsese flies by the seat of his pants. So I don't know if Jurassic Park would have been too much of an undertaking for him. That's a weird question.
Yeah.
Well, during this conversation, though, it made me think of Spielberg's Raging Bull. And he gets to beat Sugar Ray in the end. There ain't no "I didn't go down, Ray," none of that bullshit. He beats Sugar Ray in Spielberg's version. He just does. And then and then I don't know, the whole "you fuck my wife," that's a totally different scene. All of that is way different. Yeah. It turns into Cinderella Man, like sort of a dour, like old-timey boxer picture where he treats Jake LaMotta like he's Warhorse. You know what I'm saying? Like, he just reverently shoots this thing as it does historical shit.
Yes. Yeah, I could see that. You know, Janusz Kaminski photographs the whole thing beautifully. A lot of backlight, a lot of looking through screens and things like that. I was going to say, you know, we talked about it before. I think Spielberg might make a better version of Shutter Island. I think he could, because Spielberg
Yeah.
has a more natural affinity for horror. That's sort of where his sensibilities just skew. I think he's got a better knack for sort of twists and mysteries than Scorsese does. I think Spielberg's Shutter Island is a movie I would really enjoy.
Dude, along those lines, I'll top you with this one. Scorsese's Catch Me If You Can. I think Scorsese's Catch Me If You Can fucking rules.
Dude,
Yeah.
that would be interesting. Well, see, I was going to say it'd be a very, very different franchise, but like part of me would like to see Scorsese doing Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, shit.
Oh,
Yeah,
that would be
dude.
so interesting.
Dude.
Oh, man. I don't want to do
It'd be
all the
so much more
sequels, too.
violent. Nazis would be doing terrible things.
But by the same token, the Nazis would be even more threatening. Like,
Yeah.
they would
They'd
be
be
so
scarier.
cartoonishly villainous. Yeah.
Oh, and
Yeah.
there'd be a bunch of Italians up in Pankot Palace in the second one. They just be
100%.
eating scungili and shit, and then just like, ugh, they cut open a snake and there was a bunch of pasta inside. Yeah!
At least it was pasta, you know?
Here's a weird one. I think Scorsese, I know we said we weren't doing this, but Scorsese doing 1941. Because the premise of 1941 was essentially a bunch of guys, it was a bunch of like sovereign citizen militia types who just go nuts in the wake of Pearl Harbor and start preparing for an invasion to fend off an invasion of California. Right? That's essentially the plot of 1941. Scorsese in Wolf of Wall Street mode telling that story, just like this cynical, over the top, like eyes wide open look at the underbelly of American society at a moment in history. I don't know, that feels like it could be both disturbing and hilarious.
Actually, I think you're right.
Yeah. Oh, I got one last one. Scorsese's Amistad, where it's just like, hey, back in my day when you were a slave, you said give us free, and they had to do it. It's like fucking Ray Liotta voiceover for Jaimin Hansu's character, and they just never fucking they never explain it.
Back when I was a kid, all I ever wanted was to be free. I'll tell you what I'd like to see Spielberg do is Spielberg's Last Temptation of Christ. Because Spielberg has never approached something that controversial. And also, Marty is famously a good Catholic boy from New York, and Spielberg, being a good Jewish boy from California, would bring a totally different sensibility to that story.
And maybe more of a mythology bent.
I don't know, it could be more interesting. Yeah, like more of a the mythology of because like that's the one thing I think as we round out here, Spielberg and Scorsese both get America, but they're looking at it from this different point of view. But both of them make intensely American movies for the most part about Americans. And I think it's because of this particular way of seeing America, and it informs all of their jazz.
Well, that's also why that's why I was also going to say, I don't know if Spielberg could do Taxi Driver well.
Oh God.
I don't think he could do it. Honestly.
Yeah, I think that's one that we could safely say it would be in better hands. Just like that bouncy music from Jaws, dun 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 dun, and homeboy's driving his taxi, looking at people. Hey, what's going on? Dun, 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 dun. Just John Williams doing the score to fucking Taxi Driver,
dude.
Although I gotta say that while the car is driving through the rain-soaked streets, that shit would be pretty good. I think it would go. It would have some
might.
I also just it's like I don't think Spielberg has the appetite for this sort of like methodical character study that Taxi Driver is. Like, there's a reason the guy just keeps making these chase movies over and over. Is there's a kineticism that like he needs in his movies that Scorsese doesn't, and maybe that's a point to Scorsese. I don't know.
All right, so now we've reached the final countdown. We've reached the final word on this. So, you guys, in your opinion, who is the greatest, Scorsese or the main man Spielberg? We've talked about their commercial potential. We've talked about the lens through which they see the world. We've talked about the zeitgeist that each of them represents. We've talked about them both having a great brand and an oeuvre. And we've talked about Scorsese being able to be mentioned with Spielberg, even though his receipts don't stack up, which means his cultural acclaim is quite high. So with all that in mind, who do we have as being the greatest overall, according to three guys in apartments?
Okay, well, here's what I want to say. I kind of want to do a little story with this. It's not a story per se, but okay. So as far as comedy goes, Chris Rock and George Carlin are the two greatest comics to me, period. But I laugh at Chris Rock more. I would say that George Carlin changed things and maybe considered greater because of that, but I laugh more at Chris Rock. And I don't know what it is. So the reason I'm saying this is because my pick is I enjoy Spielberg more, but I think Scorsese's got to be the greatest. If that makes any sense. Because I just think what he does is on a different level and very hard to replicate. And just like overall, I think would be considered the greatest in this between these two. But I just like Spielberg better. I enjoy his movies more. That's it.
I can't argue with that. And it's interesting to me because I came into this debate anticipating that I would sort of talk myself more into the Spielberg camp. But I think coming out of it, the thing that's sticking in my mind is that, like, as much as Scorsese goes back to the well with subject matter, as a filmmaker, he keeps trying new things. And sometimes it fails. Recently it's failed. Silence was a bit of a miss, and The Irishman was a bit of a miss. But even within that, like, they're still trying to do interesting things, and he's sort of still pushing his boundaries as a filmmaker while still having made some of the greatest movies of all time, while still having very signature flourishes in everything that he does. And I think the thing that's making me lean Scorsese is that, like we talked about, Spielberg seems to have just settled into this comfortable roteness that he certainly did not display in the first 3 decades of his career. But I would argue Scorsese never displayed that either. And the fact that Scorsese is still in a place where he's experimenting, where he's taking on challenging subject matter, where he's still trying to push the boundaries of like what his version of cinema is, I got to give it to him, man. Like, to be 80 years old and doing that, all the respect in the world. Even though Spielberg is probably way more of a crowd pleaser, and I could rewatch his movies way more in total than I could the Scorsese filmography. So I'm gonna lean Scorsese.
You guys have given me a lot to think about. And I came in expecting to be way on the Scorsese train.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, over the course of this time, I'm really realizing that the stuff that Scorsese is the greatest at cannot be replicated, i.e., the people who bite off of him, it's so obvious when they do it. But Spielberg contributed some things to his field that are not unlike the things that perhaps Jack Kirby or even a more modern artist like John Byrne. There are people that got big in the comics in the 90s that looked up to John Byrne the way that the previous generation looked up to Jack Kirby. And there's invisible things like the modern artist doesn't see that they're influenced by Jack Kirby. The modern filmmaker might not see that they're influenced by Spielberg. but some of the very basics of the camera movements and the slick shit they're doing is Spielbergian. And some of the business they're giving characters and some of the refusal to be operatic, the way that Scorsese can sometimes, and just be sort of this kind of workmanlike, precise version of reality. It's not real because it's too precise and it's got too much perfect business and the camera's always too much in a perfect place. Whereas Scorsese's camera sometimes has to whip to see something because it's just out of view and, oh, I wasn't looking that way. You know what I mean? There's all this shit going on between them. So I gotta say, I might have talked myself into something similar to our Stallone versus Schwarzenegger, whereas Stallone is the greatest artist, but the greatest guy and the one who won the battle between them is Schwarzenegger, hands down. And to me, it's almost like Spielberg has won this battle hands down on all sorts of levels. But Scorsese's like, you never got me down, Steve. You never got me down. All this time that I've been getting my ass whooped by you, I have been staying here. And I'm the team that a lot of people like. Even though I didn't win the chip, you know what I'm saying? I'm still the team that people root for. You know what I mean? So in that way, I feel like Scorsese is the people's champ if Spielberg is the people's champ, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Like the actual champ as far as business and a lot of popular opinion is probably Spielberg.
Yeah.
But the people in the hood who throw the dice against the wall and they fold their newspaper up and they get on the bus, they like Scorsese. The people of New York like Scorsese. Like they like Spider-Man. You know what I mean? A lot of people like Batman and Superman, but the New Yorkers like Spider-Man. And they can tell you why they like him and why he's superior to the rich boy and the guy who flies. Scorsese's that guy.
I mean, to use the analogy that you started us off with, Ed, if they're Marvel and DC, I would argue that Spielberg is Marvel in that it's more populist, it's more street level, it's more easily appreciable. Whereas DC just might have a lot of weird stuff going on and you might not get where the characters are coming from and they don't all have clean motivations, but I'll be goddamned if there isn't just something inherently American and inherently operatic in those DC characters. I would say Scorsese is your DC and Spielberg is your Marvel. And whatever that means to you, take it or leave it. But that would be, maybe that's where we end this. Maybe that's how we end this.
And if you want more incisive commentary like that, please check out our Patreon, which you can get to at patreon.com/The Greatest Pod. And you can get premium extra podcasts there for $5 a month. Or you could pay us $7 a month to get those premium extra pods where we go in deep on all sorts of subjects like this. But we also have art in the form of postcards that we send directly to your door. You get a physical, limited print of fresh art from us every month, sent directly to your door. Thank you all for listening to another fantastic episode of The Greatest Pod.